When Emma uncovers her husband's betrayal, she's forced to confront not only the lies in her marriage, but the strength within herself. This is a story of heartbreak, choices, and the courage to walk away, even when love begs you to stay.
From the outside, Claire Morrison's life was enviable. People who didn't know her personally would glance at the polished brick townhouse on Linden Avenue, the gleaming windows, the potted flowers by the door, and assume the woman living inside had everything. And in a way, Claire herself sometimes tried to believe that too. Her husband, Daniel Morrison, was a respected attorney. He was the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room, not because he was the most handsome, though many would say he was, but because he carried himself with an air of certainty. His voice was smooth, his handshakes firm, his suits always tailored to perfection. Daniel's name was in the paper every few months. Attorney Morrison wins landmark case. Morrison firm expands, the rising star of the city's legal world. Together, they looked like the couple people aspired to be. Claire, with her soft blonde hair and calm smile, worked as an art consultant. She had an eye for color, for balance, for beauty, and clients trusted her to help shape galleries and private collections. She loved her work. She loved her townhouse. She loved, or thought she loved, her life. But perfection can be a dangerous illusion, and behind the glassy smile, behind the flowers on the stoop, something darker had begun to seep into the cracks. It started subtly. So subtly, Claire could almost pretend she hadn't noticed. Daniel had always worked long hours, that was part of his career. But in the last year, his late nights had become more frequent, his excuses more polished. The partners needed me to stay. A deposition ran over. The client was anxious and wouldn't leave until I'd reassured them. At first, she accepted it. She knew what it meant to be married to ambition. She told herself he was doing this for them, for their future, their security, their place in the world. But slowly, things shifted. He stopped calling when he was going to be late. His phone, once casually left on the counter or nightstand, now stayed in his pocket or face down on the table. He smiled less, or maybe she just noticed it less. One evening in early spring, Claire had been folding laundry in their bedroom when Daniel came home. She leaned in to hug him, breathing in his cologne, when she caught something else, something floral, delicate, not her own perfume. She froze, her hand still on his chest. "What's wrong?" he asked lightly, kissing her cheek. "Nothing," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But as he changed out of his shirt, she caught herself staring at the fabric, as if it might hold the truth she was afraid to speak aloud. The doubts grew quietly, like weeds under the surface. Claire tried to smother them. She buried herself in work, in dinners with friends, in redecorating the guest bedroom. She told herself she was imagining things, that she trusted her husband, that after 7 years of marriage, she knew him better than anyone. And yet, there were moments she couldn't ignore. Once she walked into his study to ask if he wanted tea, only to see him quickly close his laptop. His expression had shifted too fast, from focused to casual. "Just contracts," he said, but his voice was a little too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. Another time, she overheard him on the phone late at night. His voice was low, softer than usual, tinged with something that made her chest tighten. When he noticed her in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. "Client in a panic, nothing important." Claire nodded, but the seed of unease dug deeper. The house itself became her enemy. It was too quiet when Daniel was gone, the ticking of the clock echoing in the hallways. Too perfect when he was there, the polished surfaces reflecting a life that felt staged. At night, lying in bed beside him, she would stare at the ceiling while his breathing deepened into sleep. She wanted to shake him, to ask him outright what he was hiding, but fear stopped her. The fear of being wrong, the fear of breaking the fragile shell of their world. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while searching for a spare phone charger in Daniel's desk drawer, Claire found something she wasn't meant to see. It wasn't dramatic. No hidden photographs, no love letters tied with ribbon, just a receipt. A simple slip of paper from a boutique hotel downtown, one she knew they had never stayed at together. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The charge was for 2 glasses of wine, a meal, and an overnight stay. Claire stared at it until the ink blurred. Her hands shook as she folded it back into the drawer, her mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Business dinner? A client in need of discretion? But why would Daniel stay the night? Why hadn't he mentioned it? That evening, she set the table for dinner, as usual, roasted chicken and vegetables filling the air with comforting aromas. When Daniel walked in, loosening his tie, smiling like always, she looked at him differently. His features were the same, the strong jaw, the dark hair, the eyes that once made her feel safe. But now, she saw shadows there. "Long day?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "The usual," he said, kissing her cheek. "How about you?" "Fine," she murmured, pouring him a glass of wine. Her hand trembled slightly, but she forced herself to smile. She didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, she watched. She listened. Every word he spoke, every glance at his phone, every unexplained delay became a piece of a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Claire's friends noticed her distance. At brunch one weekend, her closest friend, Julia, touched her hand across the table. "You've been quiet lately, Julia," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" Claire hesitated. The easy answer rose to her lips. Of course everything's fine. But something inside her cracked, just a little. "I don't know," she admitted softly. Julia's eyes narrowed. "Is it Daniel?" Claire looked away, unable to answer. That night, she sat in her studio surrounded by half-finished canvases. Her brush hovered over the paint, but she couldn't bring herself to touch the canvas. All she could see was the receipt, the perfume, the phone calls cut short. The world she'd built was starting to fracture, and she was terrified of what she might find if she kept digging. But secrets have a way of forcing themselves into the light. A week later, Daniel left his briefcase in the hallway, something he rarely did. While putting away groceries, Claire noticed it's still there, slightly open. She didn't mean to look, at least that's what she told herself later, but curiosity, fear, and desperation guided her hands. Inside were case files, a leather notebook, and a key card. Not to his office, not to their building, to the same hotel she'd seen on the receipt. Claire's breath caught. Her heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the truth pressed down on her. Her perfect life, her perfect marriage was unraveling. And she knew, deep in her bones, that whatever door this keycard opened, she couldn't unsee what lay behind it.
Claire couldn't stop staring at the keycard. It was thin, ordinary, its edges cool against her fingertips, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. She slipped it back into Daniel's briefcase before he could notice, her heart racing so violently she thought he might hear it when he came down the hall. That night, she lay awake beside him, her eyes open to the dark. Daniel's breathing was steady, peaceful, but Claire's mind was a storm. She pictured the hotel, its gleaming lobby, the quiet hallways, the locked doors, and behind one of those doors, her husband, with someone else. The image twisted her stomach. By morning, her decision was made. She had to know. The uncertainty was eating her alive. Whether the truth destroyed her or not, she couldn't keep living in the half-light of suspicion. The next afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Claire drove downtown. The hotel stood tall and modern against the skyline, glass windows reflecting the pale spring sun. She parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel as if it could steady her. For several minutes, she couldn't move. Her chest tightened with dread, her palms slick with sweat. Finally, she forced herself out of the car. The hotel lobby was elegant but impersonal. Polished floors, leather chairs, soft music humming from hidden speakers. The receptionist smiled politely. "Good afternoon, checking in?" Claire's throat tightened. She glanced at the elevators, then back at the desk. "No, just meeting someone," she murmured. Her fingers closed around the keycard in her pocket. She had slipped it out of Daniel's briefcase again that morning, rehearsing excuses if he noticed. He hadn't. Moving quickly, she crossed the lobby and entered the elevator. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls. Pale face, tense mouth, eyes wide with fear. She pressed the button for the 7th floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet hallway lined with identical doors. She tried the card in the first one she passed. The red light blinked. She moved to the next. Another red. On the third, the light turned green. Her stomach lurched. She pushed the door open. The room was immaculate, as though no one had been there. White sheets stretched taut across the bed, a faint smell of cleaning supplies lingering in the air. Claire stepped inside slowly, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. On the desk by the window, she saw it. A receipt, crumpled but still legible. 2 glasses of wine, a meal. The date was from last week. Claire's hands trembled as she picked it up. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just stress. Daniel was here, with someone. Her knees buckled and she sank onto the bed. The silence of the room pressed in on her, suffocating. She buried her face in her hands, torn between rage and despair. She wanted to scream. She wanted to smash something. Instead, she sat frozen, her thoughts spiraling. Who was she? How long had it been going on? Had everything, their marriage, their promises, their carefully curated life been a lie? A knock on the door jolted her upright. Claire's breath caught. She shoved the receipt into her pocket and looked wildly around the room. "Housekeeping," a voice called softly. Relief crashed over her, but she still scrambled to her feet, hurrying to the door. "Just a minute," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She slipped past the housekeeper in the hallway, mumbling, "Room's fine, thank you," and fled to the elevator. Her hands shook so badly she could barely press the button. In the car, she sat gripping the steering wheel, her pulse thundering. She couldn't confront Daniel yet. Not without more. Not without certainty so sharp it couldn't be twisted into lies. She needed proof. That evening, Daniel came home as usual. Claire forced herself to smile, to laugh at his stories from work, to place roasted salmon on the table as though her world wasn't collapsing. Every gesture felt rehearsed. Every word scraped raw inside her. When he reached for her hand, she let him. When he kissed her cheek, she forced her skin not to flinch. But inside, something had shifted. She was no longer the trusting wife, the woman who looked away. She was the detective now, the one watching, waiting, piecing together the puzzle.
The following days were a blur of small betrayals. Daniel claimed to work late, but Claire drove past his office one night and saw the windows dark. Another time, he said he had an early meeting, but she found his tie still draped over the chair hours later. His phone buzzed constantly, yet when she asked, he waved it off as work nonsense. Claire's chest ached with each lie, but instead of confronting him, she wrote them down, like evidence in a case. She had a notebook hidden in her studio, filled with dates, times, inconsistencies. The pages became her lifeline, proof that she wasn't imagining things. But the deeper she dug, the more questions emerged. One Saturday afternoon, while Daniel was supposedly at a strategy session, Claire followed him. She felt sick with nerves, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she trailed his car through the city. He didn't drive to the office. He drove to the hotel. Claire parked a block away, her body trembling. She watched him step out of the car, his posture confident, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his tie, glanced around briefly, then disappeared into the lobby. Claire sat frozen. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sight of him walking into that building was like a knife through her chest. She stayed there for nearly an hour, staring at the hotel entrance, waiting for him to reappear. When he finally did, he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, tall, brunette, elegant. They didn't touch, not in public, but there was an ease between them, an intimacy in the way they leaned toward each other, as though the air itself bent around them. Claire's vision blurred with tears. She ducked low in her seat as they passed, her heart hammering. Daniel opened the woman's car door for her, a small, gallant gesture he hadn't done for Claire in years. The car pulled away, and with it, Claire's last shred of denial. That night, she confronted the empty walls of her studio, whispering the truth aloud for the first time. "He's cheating on me." The words felt foreign, heavy, but once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. She collapsed into the chair, sobbing until her throat ached. She thought of their wedding day, of Daniel's vows, of the way he had looked at her with such conviction. She thought of the years she had given him, the life she had built around his dreams. And now, all of it was a facade. But even in her grief, a spark of resolve flickered. If Daniel thought he could live two lives, if he thought he could hide the truth behind charming smiles and late-night excuses, he was wrong. Claire would uncover every secret. She would gather every piece of evidence, and when the time came, she would decide what to do with it. Not as the fragile wife he thought she was, but as the woman he underestimated. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt something other than despair. She felt clarity. The game had changed, and she wasn't going to lose.
The morning after my conversation with Sarah, I felt heavy, as if the truth of last night's revelations had seeped into my bones. My kitchen smelled faintly of stale coffee and perfume, the remnants of late-night confessions and hurried goodbyes.
I could still picture Sarah's tear-streaked face, the way her hands trembled as she spoke about Liam, about her regret, about the secret affair that had bloomed in shadows. I sat at the table, staring at my untouched breakfast. The eggs had gone cold, the toast limp, but my stomach churned too violently for food. All I could think about was my husband, Daniel. For years, I'd believed our marriage was stable, maybe even enviable. Friends had envied our dynamic, the easy laughter, the comfortable silences, the way he'd wrap his arm around me in public as if I was the only one who mattered. I thought those small gestures were proof of loyalty, love, and commitment. Now, with Sarah's words gnawing at me, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I kept replaying her confession. It wasn't just Liam I kissed. The silence that followed felt like 1,000 knives carving into my chest. She hadn't named Daniel, but the implication lingered in the room like smoke. Was she holding something back? Or was I just too paranoid, too ready to connect dots that didn't exist? By noon, paranoia had won. I couldn't sit still. Every part of me demanded answers, but I didn't know how to confront Daniel. How do you walk up to the man you share a life with and ask if he's betrayed you with someone you thought was a friend? I decided to do something I hadn't done since college. I snooped. Daniel's phone was usually guarded, tucked away in his office, or locked with a code only he knew. But luck, or maybe fate, intervened. He'd left it charging on the counter, screen lit up with notifications. My pulse hammered as I picked it up, half expecting him to walk in and catch me. At first, everything seemed normal. Work emails, group chats with his colleagues, a few messages from his brother about football. But then, buried beneath the mundane, I found a thread labeled only with an initial, S. My throat tightened as I opened it. The conversation wasn't explicit, but it wasn't innocent either. S. Last night was harder than I thought. I didn't expect to feel so much guilt. Daniel. I know. I keep telling myself it was just a mistake, but my mind replays it nonstop. S. We have to stop. If she finds out... Daniel. She won't. I promise. The room spun around me. I clutched the counter to steady myself, my breath coming in shallow gasps. S. Sarah. It had to be her. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The screen went dark, but the words glowed in my memory, searing into me like a brand. My husband and my friend, together, behind my back. A wave of nausea surged through me, and I barely made it to the bathroom in time. I knelt on the cold tiles, my entire body trembling, tears spilling unchecked. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was fact. I had the proof right there in his phone. For the rest of the day, I wandered the house like a ghost. Every framed photo on the wall mocked me. Daniel kissing my cheek on our anniversary, Sarah smiling beside me on a girls' trip, all of us together at a barbecue. They weren't just memories anymore. They were lies, frozen in time. When Daniel came home that evening, I couldn't look at him the same way. He greeted me with his usual warm smile, kissed the top of my head, and asked me how my day had been. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove his phone in his face and demand answers. But instead, I muttered something about being tired and escaped to the bedroom. I lay awake for hours listening to his steady breathing beside me. My mind ran wild. Why had he done it? Was it just physical, or did he love her? Was I not enough? By dawn, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit quietly while they destroyed me in secret. I needed the truth, every detail laid bare, and if Daniel wouldn't confess willingly, I would drag it out of him. The next morning, I arranged to meet Sarah again. We sat at the same cafe, but the energy between us was entirely different. This time, I wasn't sympathetic, I wasn't forgiving, I was ready to tear down the walls of her half-truths. Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice low but steady. Sarah's eyes widened, and for a moment she played dumb. Everything about what? Don't, I snapped. I saw the messages, Daniel and you. I know. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it, fumbling for words. Finally, she whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen." My heart thudded painfully. How long? A few months, she admitted, tears gathering. It started after that night Liam and I fought. I was drunk, Daniel was there, and one mistake turned into another. I didn't mean for it to go on. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. Months. They'd been carrying on behind my back for months, smiling in my face while living a secret life together. I stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. I said, "We're done." I said coldly. "You and I, there's nothing left to salvage." Sarah tried to reach for me, but I pulled away, leaving her sobbing at the table. That night, when Daniel walked through the door, I was ready. His phone was on the table, the incriminating messages open. "We need to talk," I said. For the first time in years, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. And I knew, one way or another, everything was about to change.
The silence between us was unbearable. Daniel stood in the doorway, frozen, his eyes darting from my face to the phone on the table. He knew. He didn't need me to explain what I had seen. The truth was already written all over his guilty expression. "Sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My hands trembled as I crossed my arms, trying to hold myself together. Daniel obeyed slowly, like a man walking to the gallows. He sat opposite me, shoulders hunched, gaze fixed on the floor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to choke on. Finally, I broke the silence. "How long?" He winced. "Please don't. How long?" His jaw tightened, he dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. Since late spring, around the time Sarah and Liam split up for a while. She was upset, I don't know, weak? Stupid? "Months," I whispered, bile rising in my throat. "You've been lying to me for months." He flinched, but didn't argue. He stared at his hands, as though if he avoided my eyes, the weight of his betrayal might lessen. "Why her?" I demanded. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "Of all people, Daniel, Sarah? She was supposed to be my friend. You knew how much I trusted her." "I didn't plan it," he muttered. "It just happened." I laughed bitterly, though nothing about this was funny. That's the best you can come up with? It just happened? Affairs don't just happen, Daniel. You make choices, again and again. Every time you texted her, every time you met up, every time you climbed into her bed, you chose her over me. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. He didn't deserve to see me break. "I thought we were happy," I said, voice trembling. "Was it all a lie?" His head snapped up, panic etched across his features. "No, God, no. I love you. I swear I do. It wasn't about you." "Don't you dare," I cut in sharply. "Don't you dare tell me it wasn't about me. You shattered our marriage, Daniel. You betrayed everything we built together. Don't you dare minimize it." He fell silent, shame burning across his face. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break every fragile object in the room just to match the chaos inside me. But instead, I whispered the question that had been clawing at me since I discovered the truth. "Do you love her?" The seconds stretched unbearably as I waited. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, every tick pounding like a hammer in my skull. Finally, Daniel shook his head. "No, I don't. It was lust, comfort, stupidity, but love? No, I never stopped loving you." I searched his face for signs of dishonesty. He looked broken, desperate, and for a fleeting moment, I almost wanted to believe him. But belief wouldn't erase the images in my head. The text messages, Sarah's tearful confession. "I can't do this right now," I said, standing abruptly. My chair scraped across the floor. "You need to leave." His eyes widened. "What? No, please, we can talk about this." "Leave," I snapped. The word tore from my throat like a command I barely recognized as my own. Daniel hesitated, then slowly stood. He reached out as if to touch me, but thought better of it. Shoulders sloped, he walked out the door without another word, leaving me in the wreckage of what once was our marriage. When the door shut, the house fell into suffocating silence. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching a pillow to my chest, and finally let the tears come. I cried until my throat was raw, until exhaustion consumed me, until the sun had long since set and the world outside felt like it belonged to someone else. The next few days blurred into one another. Daniel texted constantly. Apologies, pleased to talk, promises that he would do anything to fix things. I ignored them all. Sarah, too, reached out, begging for forgiveness, insisting she never meant to hurt me. I blocked her number without hesitation. But the silence didn't bring peace. It brought questions. Endless, agonizing questions. Should I give him a chance to explain more? Could a marriage survive such betrayal? Did I even want it to? Or was this the end?
the final chapter of our story. I found myself staring at our wedding album late at night, flipping through photos of us smiling, young in love, blissfully unaware of the storms that would one day tear us apart. Each picture was a knife to the chest. On the fourth night, Daniel showed up at the house. I nearly didn't answer the door, but something in me, morbid curiosity maybe, compelled me to open it. He stood there looking disheveled, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Please, just give me 5 minutes," he whispered. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. We sat across from each other in the living room, the same room where our life together had unfolded for years. He looked around as if seeing it all for the first time. The couch we'd chosen together, the bookshelf he built, the framed photo of our honeymoon. His gaze lingered on the small details, like he was trying to remind himself of the life he was begging me not to throw away. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he began, voice low and hoarse. "I just need you to understand, I was lonely, even with you right beside me, not because you weren't enough, because I wasn't enough. I let stress, work, life get to me, and instead of talking to you, instead of being honest, I took the coward's way out." I said nothing, watching him squirm. "I hate myself for it," he continued. "Every second I was with her, I knew I was destroying us, but I couldn't stop, and I don't know why. Maybe because it was easier than facing the truth that I was failing as a husband." "Failing?" I spat, bitterness bubbling over. "You didn't fail, Daniel. You obliterated. You torched everything. You didn't trip and fall into her arms. You chose her again and again and again." Tears spilled down his cheeks, but I refused to feel sympathy. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, transparency. I'll quit my job, change my number. Anything you want, just please don't give up on us." His words echoed in the silence. Part of me longed to cling to them, to believe we could rebuild from the ashes. But another part, the part carved raw by betrayal, knew some rumens can never be restored. I stared at him, torn between fury and longing, between grief and the faintest flicker of hope. And in that moment, I realized the hardest choice wasn't whether to forgive him. It was whether I could ever trust him again. The days that followed Daniel's desperate plea were some of the longest of my life. My mind felt like a battlefield torn between two opposing armies, one that urged me to burn every bridge and never look back, and another that whispered about the years we had built together, the memories, the history that wasn't so easily erased. I avoided him as much as I could. When he texted, I let the messages sit unread. When he called, I silenced my phone. But late at night, when the house was too quiet, I replayed his words in my head. "I'll do whatever it takes." The idea of counseling lingered in my thoughts. Therapy, transparency. Was it possible to salvage trust when it had been shattered so thoroughly? Could love truly survive betrayal? On the 5th day, I agreed to meet him at a neutral place, a park not far from our home. I didn't want to be trapped in the house with him, surrounded by ghosts of what used to be. I needed space to breathe, to think. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. He looked nervous, fiddling with his hands, his leg bouncing restlessly. When he saw me, relief washed over his face, but he didn't move toward me. He let me choose where to sit. I took the far end of the bench, leaving a wide gulf between us. For a while, we sat in silence, the sounds of children playing in the distance filling the space between us. "I booked an appointment," Daniel finally said, his voice quiet. I glanced at him warily. "For what?" "For couples therapy, this Friday. I know you haven't decided anything yet, but I wanted to show you I'm serious." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of performance. Instead, I saw exhaustion, regret, and something I hadn't seen in a long time: fear. He was terrified of losing me. "I haven't said I'll go," I reminded him. "I know," he said quickly. "It's your choice. Everything is your choice now. I wanted to try." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a flicker of control return to me. He wasn't dictating anymore. He was begging. "I'll think about it," I said flatly, and his shoulders sagged with relief. That night, I wrestled with my decision. Therapy felt like stepping into the unknown, reopening wounds that were already gaping. But avoiding it meant never knowing if there was even a sliver of hope for us. And deep down, a part of me wasn't ready to abandon hope. Not yet. So, on Friday, I went. The therapist's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Daniel and I sat side by side, though the gap between us felt as wide as an ocean. The therapist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, introduced herself and explained how the sessions would work. Then she asked the question that made my stomach drop. "Why are you here today?" I froze, unsure how to answer. Daniel cleared his throat. "Because I broke my wife's trust," he said bluntly, "and I don't want to lose her." The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. For once, he wasn't sugarcoating. The therapist turned to me. "And what about you?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him, but I need to know if it's even possible." And so it began.
The sessions were brutal. Every word felt like salt in an open wound. I learned things I didn't want to know. How Daniel and Sarah's affair started, how it progressed, the lies he told to cover it up. He confessed details that made my chest ache, but the therapist encouraged honesty, no matter how painful. "You can't rebuild on half-truths," she said gently. Some days I left the sessions feeling numb. Other days I stormed out in anger, refusing to look at Daniel for hours afterward. But beneath the rage and sorrow, something unexpected stirred. Clarity. For the first time, I saw the cracks in our marriage that had existed long before the affair. Daniel had felt neglected, overwhelmed, unseen. And though nothing excused his betrayal, I couldn't deny my own role in the widening distance between us. I had been so focused on work, on maintaining appearances, that I hadn't noticed him slipping away. One night, after a particularly grueling session, Daniel and I sat in the car outside the therapist's office. The silence was thick, but different than before. Not hostile, just heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, he spoke. "Do you hate me?" The question startled me. I turned to look at him, his eyes glistening in the dim light. "I want to," I admitted. "Some days I think I do, but then I remember the man I married, the man who held my hand through every storm, and I can't. Not completely." Tears slipped down his cheeks, and he reached for my hand hesitantly. For the first time in weeks, I didn't pull away. But holding his hand didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase the image of Sarah, or the late-night texts, or the lies whispered in the dark. That weekend, I made a choice. I told Daniel he could come back to the house, but only to the guest room. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation. It was a test, a fragile step towards something that might resemble healing. Living under the same roof again was strange. We moved like strangers in familiar spaces, cautious and tentative. Sometimes we slipped into old routines, cooking dinner together, watching TV on opposite ends of the couch. But the intimacy was gone, replaced by a careful distance neither of us dared cross. And yet, in quiet moments, I caught glimpses of the man I once loved. The way he laughed at a joke on TV, the way he instinctively reached for the dishes after dinner, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It was infuriating, because just when I wanted to write him off completely, he reminded me why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. But the real test came 2 weeks later. I was cleaning out the guest room when I found Daniel's work bag. Inside, there was a folder of papers, and tucked between them, a photograph. It was of him and Sarah smiling at a bar, their heads pressed close together. My stomach clenched as I stared at it. The photo wasn't recent, it was from months ago, before everything came crashing down, but the sight of it reignited every wound I thought I'd begun to stitch closed. That night, I confronted him. I slammed the photo onto the table, my voice shaking. "Why do you still have this?" Daniel's eyes widened. "I didn't know it was there, I swear. I thought I'd gotten rid of everything." "Do you expect me to believe that?" I demanded. "Yes," he pleaded. "I kept it at first because I was stupid and weak, but after everything came out, I got rid of everything else. Texts, emails, pictures. That one must have slipped through. Please, you have to believe me."
The desperation in his voice was convincing, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. I stood there, torn between fury and exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this," I whispered. "Every time I start to believe you, something drags me back down. How do I know this won't happen again?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice raw. "Because I've never been more terrified of losing anything in my life. I've already lost your trust, your love. I can't lose you too. I won't survive it." For a long moment, I just stared at him, the photo trembling in my hand. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Whether I ever forgave him, whether or not we rebuilt our marriage, my life would never be the same. The only question was, which version of the future would I choose? Sleep became a stranger to me. Even when exhaustion dragged my body into bed, my mind refused to rest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's words echoing in the quiet. "I can't lose you. I won't survive it." Sometimes I wanted to believe him. Other times, the betrayal replayed in vivid detail. The secret texts, Sarah's tearful face, the months of lies whispered into darkness. Every time I thought I was healing, the wound ripped open again. Daniel did everything he could to prove his sincerity. He checked in constantly, told me where he was, shared his phone without me asking. He went to individual therapy in addition to the sessions we attended together. He cooked dinner, washed dishes, folded laundry, tasks I had once begged him to help with, and now he performed without complaint. But no matter what he did, the question remained, was it enough? One afternoon, after a long day at work, I found him in the kitchen chopping vegetables. He looked up, smiled softly, and asked, "How was your day?" The normalcy of it infuriated me. "You don't get to act like everything's fine," I snapped before I could stop myself. He froze, knife halfway through a carrot. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," I cut in, my voice sharp. "But I can't do this dance, Daniel. I can't pretend we're normal. We're not. You broke us." His shoulders sagged and he set the knife down. "I know, and I don't expect normal overnight. I want to be here. Even if it's hard, even if you hate me, I'll stay as long as you'll let me." I stormed off before he could see the tears threatening to fall. The next therapy session cracked me open in ways I wasn't prepared for. The therapist asked me, "What would forgiveness look like for you?" The question stunned me. I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I hadn't stopped to imagine what forgiveness might even mean. I don't know. I don't know if I'm capable of it. Forgiveness feels like letting him off the hook, like telling him what he did is okay. The therapist shook her head gently. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning the betrayal. It means freeing yourself from carrying it like a stone around your neck. You can forgive and still choose to walk away. Or you can forgive and choose to rebuild. Either way, forgiveness is for you, not him. Her words haunted me for days. Could I forgive without staying? Could I release the pain without binding myself to Daniel again? That weekend, I ran into Sarah for the first time since cutting her off. It happened at the grocery store, an ambush of fate. She looked pale, hollow, a shadow of the vibrant friend I once knew. When our eyes met, she froze, then approached hesitantly. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling, "just hear me out." Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, but some masochistic part of me stood still. "I'm sorry," she said, tears welling, "not just for the affair, but for destroying our friendship. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know it's over, completely. I ended things with Daniel the moment you found out. I couldn't keep living with the guilt." Her words didn't bring relief. If anything, they stung more. "You think that makes it better?" I hissed. "That because you ended it when you got caught, I should somehow respect that? You slept with my husband, Sarah. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. We're done. Forever." She nodded, tears spilling. "I know, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life." I left her standing there, broken, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. When I told Daniel about the encounter later, he listened quietly, guilt written across his face. "I don't care what she said," I told him firmly. "This isn't about her anymore. This is about you and me." He nodded. "I understand." but the conversation lingered in my head. Because as much as I wanted to erase Sarah from the equation, her involvement was a wound that would never fully heal. Every time I looked at Daniel, I saw her shadow between us. One night, weeks later, I finally broke. We were sitting in the living room, a movie playing Forgotten on the TV. I turned to him, my chest tight. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. Panic flashed across his face. "Please, don't say that." "No," I interrupted, my voice steadier now. "Listen to me. I can't keep living like this, waiting for the pain to disappear. It's not going to. And I can't rebuild with someone I don't trust. Every time you leave the room, every time your phone buzzes, I wonder. I can't live like that." He reached for me, desperation spilling from him. "I'll prove it. Every day, for the rest of my life. Just don't give up on us." Tears filled my eyes. "That's the problem, Daniel. You already gave up on us. Long before I knew the truth, you gave up when you chose her." His face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw him accept it, the possibility that no matter how much he fought, he might not win me back. "I don't know what I'm going to decide," I admitted, my voice breaking. "But I need time, real time. Without you here, without therapy sessions, without constant reminders. I need space to figure out if forgiveness is even possible." Daniel nodded slowly, tears streaming unchecked. "If that's what you need, I'll give it to you. But please, don't let this be goodbye." That night, he packed a bag and left the house. The silence that followed was suffocating, but also liberating. For the first time since the affair came to light, the weight of his presence wasn't crushing me. I could breathe, even if the air still burned. In the quiet days that followed, I found myself rediscovering pieces of me I had lost. I went for long walks, I cooked meals just for myself, I read books late into the night uninterrupted. Slowly, I began to feel like my own person again. Not just Daniel's wife, not just Sarah's friend, not just the betrayed. But the question still lingered, sharp and unavoidable. When the time came, would I choose to let him back in or close the door forever? The silence in the house became a mirror. With Daniel gone, every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator reminded me of the absence I had demanded. At first, the loneliness was unbearable, like I had cut off a limb. But over time, I realized it wasn't just loneliness, it was space. Space to think, to breathe, to feel without the constant shadow of his guilt hanging over me. I spent weeks like that, just me, my thoughts, and the slow process of rediscovering who I was outside of being Daniel's wife. I went back to yoga, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends I had let drift away while consumed by my marriage. I even took a weekend trip alone to a cabin by the lake, something I'd always wanted to do, but never dared. There, sitting by the water with a cup of tea, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't a destination, it was a choice, one I would have to make again and again, day after day. But reconciliation, that was different. That was about two people, and I wasn't sure Daniel was the person I wanted to keep choosing. When I returned, I asked him to meet me. He arrived at the cafe nervous, his hands fidgeting, his eyes searching mine like a drowning man begging for air. "How are you?" he asked cautiously. "Better," I said honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I can hear my own voice again." He swallowed hard. "And what's it telling you?" I took a deep breath. My heart pounded. This was it. "It's telling me that I can forgive you," I said softly. Relief flashed in his eyes, but I raised a hand before he could speak. "But that doesn't mean I can stay with you." The hope in his face shattered. "Please, don't do this. We can rebuild. I know we can." I shook my head, tears welling. "I don't want to rebuild, Daniel. Not with you. Every brick we lay would remind me of what you destroyed. I'd never trust the foundation, and that's no way to live for either of us." His face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might collapse right there. "So, this is goodbye?" "Yes," I whispered, my throat tight. "It's goodbye." The words broke me, but they also set me free. For so long, I had been chained to the betrayal, to the hope of fixing what was shattered. But in that moment, I realized I didn't want to fix it. I wanted to build something new, on my own terms, without ghosts haunting every corner. Daniel wept openly, and though part of me ached to comfort him, I stayed still. His pain was no longer mine to carry. When I walked out of the cafe, the air felt different, lighter. I wasn't naive. I knew healing would take time. There would still be nights of tears, flashes of anger, moments of doubt. But the decision was made. I had chosen myself. In the months that followed, I continued rebuilding. I sold the house we once shared and moved into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I decorated it with colors I loved, filled it with books and plants, and for the first time in years, every choice felt like mine alone. I went back to school, part-time, something I had put off for years in favor of Daniel's career. I laughed more, cried less, and discovered strength in places I never thought to look. As for Daniel, he respected my decision. Occasionally, he reached out with updates, but I kept the distance. I wished him healing, truly, but his journey was no longer entwined with mine. And Sarah? I never saw her again. I didn't need to. She was part of a past chapter, one I had closed for good. One evening, nearly a year after the cafe goodbye, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. The city buzzed below me, life moving forward, unstoppable. I sipped a glass of wine and let the quiet settle around me. I realized then that the betrayal had not destroyed me. It had transformed me. I had been broken, yes, but in the breaking, I had been forced to rebuild stronger, wiser, and more whole. And for the first time, I felt truly free.